Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Michelle here from happyhealthyher.com. And in this week's Compassionate Chat, I'm getting a little bit dramatic. It's Leo season and I'm a Leo sun and this calls for some drama. We're going to talk about something that I truly believe is the one piece of information that is the key to navigating virtually everything in life. Greater happiness, better health, more peaceful relationships, and career success. It all comes down to this one thing, and it's not likely what you think. So we're going to get into it along with 9 tips for maximizing its growth. So please stick with me to the end. I think you'll find this to be valuable. This totally changed the trajectory of my life. So what is this most powerful tool? It is true self-awareness. Now, I realize that doesn't sound sexy or magical, and it's not. It is some of the hardest work you will ever do, and I believe it's actually part of every person's life purpose to know thyself. In the broadest sense, self-awareness is recognizing how we show up in the world, how we are perceived by others, along with our most positive and our negative traits. Now, one of the core elements of narcissistic behavior is lacking self-awareness. So by focusing on this type of awareness, you are shifting away from narcissism, which is incredibly important right now as our society becomes increasingly more narcissistic. So how can you actually become self-aware? This is where it gets tricky. So over 30 years ago, I took an advanced psychology class. I've always been fascinated with psychology and human behavior. And so I was in college and we were given the assignment to create a presentation, to pick a topic and then give a presentation to the class. So I chose the topic of the self. I really didn't even know what that meant or like what I was going to uncover. But what I found was so interesting. And as part of my project, I gave the class an assignment. I said to everyone, share 3 things that you know to be true about yourself. Just write them down. And so everyone did that. And then I asked, how do you know those things are true? So the things that we're talking about, what we usually use to describe ourselves are adjectives like friendly or outgoing or kind or intelligent. And the truth of the matter is we only know those things because of what is mirrored back to us by the people around us. So if you were in advanced classes in school, you know you're intelligent. If all your friends always laugh at your jokes, you know you're funny. This is how we develop ourselves. It comes from being in society. It comes from the people that we are surrounded by. So there's an added awareness to this that's a little bit scary. If you are around people who don't have your best interests at heart, who aren't trying to lift you up and make you see yourself in a positive light, then you're going to struggle. People who are cruel or manipulative are going to cloud your awareness. So this is why I focus so much of my work on narcissism and healing from narcissistic abuse. I was a fairly confident person when I graduated college. However, after college and all my training as a dietitian, I had to look around the country to find a job in my chosen profession. And I ended up ultimately leaving my state and all my security, all the people that I knew, all my family and my friends. I ended up in a state and in a job where I was very isolated and very alone. I didn't know any people. And then before I knew it, I found myself in a relationship with a covert narcissist. And over time, found myself fully surrounded by people who didn't have my best interests and were not actually showing me my best light or making me feel positive about myself. took actually leaving that toxic environment and doing a lot of deep work for me to come back to my true self and gain the confidence that I now feel like I have. So again, super powerful to have a full understanding of your self-awareness. So how do we get that true self-awareness? I'm going to give you 2 questions that you can start pondering. I'm actually going to include those questions in the description below, so you don't have to remember them as I'm sharing them now. These are going to be great things for you to journal on and reflect on over time. The first of these is, why do I behave the way I do and think what I think? This is basically a very broad but very important question, and it's getting to the heart of what programming are you operating with? This comes down to what we value, how we were raised, who we are around regularly, and of course any core wounds that we may have. These are things from childhood. These are just things that we feel bad about in ourselves. We need to know all of these things. The second question is, what am I here for? And this is way bigger than what career you are meant to do. And interestingly, it's much simpler than you think. It's typically the most positive thing that you do in your life that's as normal as breathing. So for some people, it's teaching. People are natural born teachers. For some people, they're natural creators. For some people, they're natural at being nurturers or compassionate. It's very basic, and it's at the core of who you are. So I really struggled with this question around 12 years ago when I was in my late 30s, and I wrote a blog about it, and I'm going to link to that below. It has some resources that might help you if this is something that you ultimately struggle with. But the bottom line is, like I said, it's really more of the core of who you are and less about the things you do maybe for work. It's more about the heart of who you are and how you show up in the world every day. That is at the heart of why you are here on this planet. So journal on those 2 questions, reflect on them. I think it's especially powerful to do that before going to bed, because that's actually sort of planting the question into your subconscious, and oftentimes you may find deeper awareness comes over time. So 9 tips for greater self-awareness and improving your life. The first is one of my favorites, but I know it's not going to be popular for everybody, but astrology. When I started digging into my birth chart, which was probably around 8 years ago at this point, it was like looking into a mirror. So many things finally made sense for me. And it's taken me many more years to really get a full understanding of all of the most painful patterns that are actually displayed in my chart. My narcissistic magnet tendencies, my tendency towards being codependent or having far too much compassion for other people than I have for myself, it's all spelled out in my chart. So this is really a cool piece, a cool tool that you can use. I have a life map coaching program where I actually will create an extremely detailed birth chart for you, along with personal tips and sort of intuitive insights that I can get in relationship to your life that I think will help you. I also have my astrology mentor, Damian McKinnon, who is from Modern Astrology. He has generously shared a video from one of his courses that shows you how to create a free birth chart. So if you can't afford any type of astrology chart or a reading, please go ahead and use one of the free tools. There are so many available right now. So I'm going to link to Damian's website and his particular video below. The second tip for greater self-awareness is diving into personality theory. Again, this is something that I know not everyone agrees with, but I have found it incredibly helpful. 16personalities.com is a great site where you can take the free test and get some insight into how you think. The really important piece of this, though, is that you have to be completely honest when you answer the questions. A lot of people say that the personality testing does not make sense because you get different results, but that is because we oftentimes will answer in ways that are not incredibly true to ourselves. We might answer in ways that we think society wants us to answer. You have to be 100% true with this. When I learned I was an INFJ personality type, my whole world changed because suddenly I realized why and how I think so much differently from everyone else. The INFJ type is one of the most rare. And so, yeah, it's like you have to accept that, okay, I think differently and therefore I'm going to show up differently. It's really helpful, I think, if you're in a group to understand each other's personality types. My group of besties, there are 4 of us, we all took the test. It was so helpful to understand each other and also really validating because we all show up exactly how our personality types would imply we would show up, but it helps us to see each other's perspective and understand each other with a lot more clarity and compassion even. So the third tip for greater self-awareness is deeper energy work. I have done this and it's so powerful. So what I'm referring to is things like hypnotherapy, EMDR, or EFT, which is also called meridian tapping. These are tactics that can actually access our subconscious mind, which is 95% of our minds. So this is no small thing. A lot of what is true for us is buried in our subconscious and hard to access. But if you use deeper energy work tools, you can get to that. So I will link, I have several free resource pages on my website, happyhealthyher.com, that talk about each of these practices. EMDR is always going to require a professional, but you can do hypnotherapy via tapes, and you can most definitely do tapping on your own for free. And so I highly suggest you work with those types of tools whenever you can. The fourth tip is to seek a coach or a therapist, but I give a strong caveat to this. You really have to find someone who works well with you. I have had 3 therapists over the course of my life, and really only one got me. But even she had some tactics that were not quite in alignment with how I work. And so therapy was really a hard thing for me. Coaching, I feel like, is a lot more gentle approach. I actually offer coaching in my practice. I use a very hands-off, compassionate style. And so it really is going to depend on your particular needs. If you are someone, though, by the way, who's busy, and is like, I don't have time to think about this stuff, well, then you need therapy more than anyone else. Because the thing about having a therapist is that you have a set schedule, you have a time where you actually have some ability to focus on working on this self-awareness, working on yourself. It's incredibly important. Mental health is like so foundational to everything else. And so you really can't overlook this. So using the tool that feels the best for you is going to really be helpful. The fifth thing is something I talk about all the time because it is really very helpful. It's almost like having therapy on your own, and that is journaling. But I also lump in with the journaling meditation and also walking. If you're someone who's like, I don't like to sit in meditation, or you're like, I don't like to write, even just walking in nature or with like a great playlist will give you the space to sort of hear your own thoughts. Because that's the thing, is like I mentioned, we're often so busy that we're not even like aware of what's going on with us. So one of the things that's great to do before journaling or meditating or even taking a walk is asking, what do I need to know? It's like you're actually asking your subconscious mind, or if you believe in this, a higher power. And when you do this, I mean, it's amazing what sort of insights just will show up. This happens for me all the time. I get a lot of insight when I finally get quiet enough to hear my own thoughts. Number 6 is to ask trusted and safe people for insight. So I'm not just talking about your cheerleader friends. I'm talking about your honest friends who are going to give it to you straight up. Most do not see our blind spots. And this is really, really important when it comes to self-awareness. So we have to see all of the stuff. And sometimes the things that we think we're doing that feels like really healthy, feels like really beneficial, is actually harming us. So if you have very codependent tendencies, if you're always trying to help everybody else, but you're never looking after your own self, you need to check that, because that is ultimately going to lead you into burnout or some form of distress. You really have to be able to see your own perspective and take care of yourself instead of always looking externally. It can be hard to do because we're taught to be nice people and we think that that's the best approach. But being a nice person doesn't necessarily mean beating yourself up or depleting yourself. There is a very fine line there, and you really want to seek the balance. And people who you trust can do that for you. A bonus tip there is animals and kids are a really good read of energy. They're like natural empaths. So if you're feeling like off, spend time with kids and animals. They will actually make you feel better. And if you've been told you're a terrible person and animals gravitate towards you or kids gravitate towards you, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not a terrible person. They are great reads of energy. So that has always been something that when I was going through narcissistic abuse and I was being told I was a really terrible person, what was so beautiful to me was that animals were coming out of the woodwork, sitting at my feet, always being drawn to my energy. And I was like, I don't know how terrible I could possibly be if this little helpless animal knows that I'm safe. So again, that is kind of a bonus cool thing, is if animals and kids gravitate towards you and like you. You can't be too bad if that's the case. So number 7 is to focus on the good. We have such a terrible tendency of focusing on the criticisms we've received. But it's really, really important that we know the good parts of us and that we actually fixate on the praise. I think it's super helpful to keep a praise folder where you actually print out emails from people, or you have letters of recommendation or testimonials for your work, or cards from people who really see your worth and love you. When you're having a hard time, you can pull out that praise folder and it will ultimately boost you up and make you realize, oh, I have all these great traits. The 8th thing when it comes to self-awareness is pretty obvious, but I don't think we all do this, and that is to pay attention to your health. Poor health in all its facets. So we're talking depression, anxiety, digestive distress. Anything that's coming up is a signal to you that something is off in your environment. You're either in a too stressful of a work environment perhaps, or you're in too much of a worry state, or perhaps you're around the wrong people. Your body is going to be a really good indicator of that. So please, please, health is not random. There's some things that come up, viruses, of course, chemical sensitivities are going to be things that are related specifically to your environment, but a lot of health is related to the energies around us and actual blockages that come up because of stress or being in negative environments. So please, please, please pay attention to that. And then number 9 is don't skip the dark stuff. You must be able to see all aspects of yourself clearly, the good and the bad. This is often referred to as shadow work, and it is awareness of all your most negative and potentially harmful traits. This is incredibly powerful. In fact, this is one of the most crucial elements of fully owning yourself, because we all have this tendency to bury the hard stuff. the things that we don't want to see or the things we don't like about ourselves, we push away. Yet when you face them head on, they don't have power over you anymore. And the coolest thing about knowing your weaknesses is that no one can bully you. There's nothing anyone can say to you that you don't already know. So I was told my whole life that I was too sensitive, and I saw that as such a painful criticism. And now if someone says that, I'm like, yeah, it's one of my best traits. Thank you. I am sensitive. I totally own it because there's no way I can bury it anymore. It is a core piece of who I am, and it truly is one of the best aspects of myself. So one of the only reasons we actually fear another person's opinion is because it triggers these insecurities in us. But when we own our own stuff, when we're aware of our insecurities, they don't trigger us anymore. Not to mention, you start to realize that what other people think or say doesn't actually matter. What you think about yourself, what you know about yourself, is what is most important. And interesting to me is that the surprising root of true confidence is knowing all your stuff, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, of course, we want to be working on the stuff that's negative, but we don't want to shame or bury it. That is how it controls us. That is how other people control us. So, as always, I hope this was helpful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. Please like and subscribe and share with friends. And as always, I wish you happiness and good health, and I thank you for being with me.